Welcome to your MBA in Leadership and Management with Aspire Business School. In this module, we'll be talking about problem solving, and specifically, we'll look at problem solving and decision making in the workplace. But I'm sure you'll learn some skills that you can apply to your personal life as well. So let's have a look at some objectives of this module. So by the end of the session, you'll be able to identify the problems that are general to every workplace and those that are specific to your organization that you work in. You'll be able to determine how to solve problems that you face as a supervisor using a problem-solving model or using the Fishbone analysis, which we'll go into. You'll be able to identify the characteristics that make up an effective problem solver. You'll be able to determine the ingredients of good decision making, and you'll effectively be able to make collaborative decisions with your team using the gradients of agreement tool that we'll go into a bit more detail. So what is problem solving? Problem solving, in terms of our definition, is creating a gap or filling the gap between what things are like now and how we want them to be, or how we think they should be. And problem solving is really focused on the past, so it's very analytical, it's very operational, and it's done at the lower levels of an organization. And we will define a problem as something that is currently happening, is an unsatisfactory state that needs to be changed into the desired state as quickly as possible. And it might also be some deviation from standard process and standard procedure that is preventing us as an organization in achieving our objectives. What is then decision making? So decision making is more of a broader concept that's very different to problem solving. It's the act of making a choice between two or more options and deciding on one option to go for. And whilst problems and problem solving is past focused, decision making is future focused. So it's often quite creative, it's very directional, and it's done at the senior levels. So in other words, we can see here that problem solving is actually part of decision making, or may even be a subset of decision making. Let's have a look at the types of problems that are typically encountered in every workplace. So the first is the way that people will work together, the way they meet targets and deadlines, the way they work within tight budgets, they get praise from their supervisors, and they work within the norms and the culture of the organization. And typically all of these things will add to problems in a workplace, because in every workplace these things exist. So every workplace has targets and deadlines they need to meet, people that are working with lots of other people, they have budgets and deadlines to manage, they want to be praised by their supervisors, and there is a culture within the organization they have to work within as well. So there are specific problems that are common to every workplace, because every workplace has human beings in it that have to be working together in order to achieve the goals of the organization. And let's go through now some of the typical problems each workplace encounters. So you might have problems of communication. So this might be that things are not being communicated in a timely manner, maybe they're not being communicated to the people that need to know them. It might be an attitude problem. So some people may have a very negative attitude to their work that creates problems when it comes to working with them or achieving goals. Another problem could be interpersonal challenges between a supervisor and their subordinate, or even amongst the subordinates or the team members themselves. There might be issues of ethics. So is the organization, or are people in the organization doing something that is ethically incorrect? Typically organizations have problems with poor performance, because not every employee will perform at their optimal level all the time. Organizations may also have issues with discrimination or harassment. But there are another set of problems that are peculiar to an organization for various reasons. And this are issues that are unique to your organization. That could be there are certain policies that are very unique to your workplace. They may be regulation related. Maybe you work in a particular sector that is regulated in a heavy way that doesn't apply to other organizations in different sectors. Or there may be problems with processes that have to be followed in a certain way in your organization. So if you have certain standards that you have to live by and work by within your industry, it will affect your organization but not many others. Potentially you may have problems with the types of clients that your organization provides a service to if your organization provides a service. And also you might have certain constraints that are unique to your organization. So that might be a lack of resources or stretched resources. It might be specific equipment that you're using. So thinking about the organization that you work in now, if you do work in a business, what are some unique problems that are really only experienced by your organization or organizations in your industry? Let's now look at how you currently solve problems. So, do you take specific steps, or do you have a certain approach to problem solving? Or are they solved just randomly depending on what your mood's like, or the people that you're working with, or people that are causing problems? But if you have a specific method, or you take certain steps, what are those steps? Have you actually observed how people in your team respond to your approach to problem solving? And in terms of your rate of success, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being terrible and 10 being completely successful, what's your current rate of effectiveness at solving problems? So if you want to effectively solve problems in your workplace, here are some things that you really need to keep in mind. First thing is that problems are very difficult to manage if you think of them in large or global terms. So if you say to yourself, everything is going wrong, this person will never change, there's no hope of change, you're actually making the problem ambiguous and too big to handle. Because if everything is going wrong, then what does everything mean? Surely everything can't be going wrong. And also, your problems in themselves shouldn't be allowed to linger. So don't leave them lying around unresolved for too long. Because often just waiting for things to change isn't a strategy, because things might not work out for themselves. Some action will be needed, and the sooner you take action, the better. It's good to practice some fairness in problem solving. So when you are commending your team or constructively criticizing your team, then it's important to establish a culture of fairness in how you make decisions and how you take decisions. Because one rule needs to apply to everyone in a system and a situation that is fair. And also, if there has to be some punishment handed out to the individual, it needs to be fair in terms of what they've done. So for example, if somebody is constantly late to a meeting, you might want to take that person aside and talk to them. And that punishment fits the crime. But if somebody has laundered money, then they more likely need to be fired and reported to the authorities, so the punishment has to fit the crime. There are so many different ways of solving a problem. Let's have a look at some ways that have worked well. The first is the trial and error method. So this means that you try one solution. If that doesn't work, you try another, and you keep trying until you find a solution that works. That's trial and error. Another method is experimentation. So you take a new theory and you test it out. So you have a prediction, and you take your knowledge and your understanding to see if that works in solving the problem. An affinity map is a tool that's used to identify problems in some businesses, and you can look that up in some of the recommended reading that we gave you. There are also some problem-solving models, and one of these is the Fishbone analysis, which we will look at in this particular module. So a problem-solving model is really a step-by-step approach to solving a problem that means that you have a structure to follow when you come to solving a problem. So the first thing to do is to recognize that there's a problem and understand what that problem is. So you will ask, who is causing the problem and who will the problem affect? What are the visible signs that there is a problem, i.e. where's the evidence? When does it happen? Where does it happen? Why does it happen? And how does it actually happen? The next step is to gather information about the problem. So be able to recognize why the problem's happening and make it clear to everybody involved that this problem is real. And then you'd look at analyzing the information that's available to you. So how has this problem been solved in the past? And what do you have that's your understanding of how the problem has been solved in the past? The next step is to develop some solutions to solving the problem and choose the best one. So what are all the features of the ideal solution? What parts of the solution do you think won't fit very well in solving your problem? What are the dependencies and the requirements? What risks are there associated with this particular solution? And then which solution will you implement? Then when you implement the solution, this is when you take the action to solve the problem, and then you monitor the effects. And then you actually continually evaluate the solution to see what's the ultimate result of this particular solution, how is it going after you've implemented it. One problem-solving model is the Fishbone analysis. So this is a diagram that you will create, and it's a systematic way of understanding problems, but actually understanding the root cause of those problems. And it's called the Fishbone diagram because you create a diagram that looks like a fish with the bones. That's why it's called the Fishbone diagram. And it was invented by Dr. Ishikawa, who was a Japanese quality control statistician. And sometimes it can be called a Fishbone diagram, an Ishikawa diagram, or a cause and effect diagram. And the great advantage of a Fishbone diagram is that it allows teams to assess the potential root cause of a problem in the system or in a process, and it gives them a very clear picture of what the problem is and why the problem exists, but all the possible reasons why the problem actually exists. So typically it's used in a brainstorming session. Okay, so we'll look at an example of the diagram in a moment, but when you draw the diagram, the central problem is placed at the head of the fish. So you will draw a circle or a triangle here and you'll write down what the actual problem is. And then you have the body of the fish with the bones, and you'll create branches for the main themes of why this problem could exist. What are all the typical parts of that particular problem? And typically it's used when teams want to explore or study the potential root cause of a problem. They want to understand all the reasons why this thing is happening, or why a process isn't functioning as it should, and why are the results that we expect not actually happening. So an example of a Fishbone diagram is to write the problem that you're trying to solve, and then in each of the bones of the fish, you can use something like the 6 M's, which is methods, machines, materials, manpower, measurement, management. The 4 P's, place, procedure, people, policies, or the 4 S's, surroundings, suppliers, systems, skills. And of course, this is looking at problems in your workplace. So if you have a problem that you want to understand the root cause for, and you're struggling to categorize all the different reasons for why this problem is happening, using the 6 M's, 4 P's or 5 S's is one way that you can actually categorize the potential root causes of the problem. So once you've written the name of the problem at the head of the fish, you would label each bone of the fish with each one of these categories, and then each category is completed in as much detail. and gives you a reason for why this problem is happening. So creating that fishbone diagram is actually an exhaustive process. You continually keep asking, what else could be causing this problem in this category, until you have nothing else left that's a potential possibility. So each part of the fishbone has to be quite detailed. And what you do next is you will then look at all the potential causes, and then you'll actually list out the most likely causes of this problem. So all the factors leading into the problem may not be the most likely causes. There are some that will, and they're the ones that you will focus on as a team and try and resolve in order to solve the problem. So let's have a look at an example of a fishbone diagram. So this is just a template, okay? So you can see on the left in orange is the name of the problem itself. And this particular fishbone is using the 6 M's as its structure. So each bone of the fish has been labeled man, machine, management, measurement, material, and methods. And then each bone has a little branch coming off it, and that's what you could use to add all the possibilities in each category that will cause the problem that you are facing that's written at the head of the fish in orange. So this particular diagram here in the slide before uses the 6 M's, but of course you could use the 4 P's: place, procedure, people, policies, all the 4 S's: surroundings, suppliers, systems, and skills. Let's take a look at a very simple example of a fishbone diagram. So the problem here is being late for work. That's at the head of the fish on the left. And you can see here that the bones of the fish have been labeled people, method, measurement, etc. And then in each of the branches, or each of the bones of the fish, the various things that are included in each category are added here. So for example, under machine, you could say that I'm late for work because my coffee machine was broken at home and I wasn't able to make coffee in time. Or under machinery, also my car didn't start as quickly as I wanted it to. Or under machine, the train was late. But also under machine, the alarm clock didn't come back on after I hit snooze, for example. Or under method, you could look at, well, the alarm clock is the method I use to wake up. Is it an effective method? Is it the time that I wake up that's a problem? Is my route to work too long or complicated? Or do I actually live too far away from work to make it in on time? Or do I live too close to work that it makes me lazy and I don't come in on time because I think I'll have a very short journey? So we won't explore this diagram in detail word for word now, but you can see here an example of how a fishbone diagram works. So once you've written the problem and its key categories and every element in that category, you will then pick out, well, actually, what are the most likely causes of my being late for work? What are the root causes? So you could actually decide it's my car, okay? I never have enough petrol in my car, and it just means that my route to work is overcomplicated because I have to put petrol in the car first thing in the morning. Actually, what I can probably do is put petrol into my car on my way home the night before, and I wouldn't have this problem being late to work, for example. Now let's look at some characteristics of somebody who's very effective at problem solving. So the first characteristic is that somebody who's very good at problem solving is able to have confidence in their ability to actually solve the problem, or at least be able to learn enough to solve the problem. They rely on their own judgment. So even though they know that there is wisdom in asking lots of people for their advice, they actually respect their own decision-making abilities. They're not afraid of being wrong and making mistakes because they know that mistakes only help us to learn. They don't actually answer questions quickly, or they don't make quick decisions based on limited information. And they're actually quite flexible, and they're able to see more than one answer or one potential fix to the problem. They know the difference between what is fact and what is opinion, and they know that in order to make a decision, there needs to be valid evidence. So valid evidence needs to exist in order for a decision to be made well. But they also know that they don't have to be in possession of the actual final absolute solution to every single problem. Some problems can be left unsolved because they're not as important as some other ones, for example. They always have a method and an approach to solving problems, and if they come across a problem that's new to them, they'll develop a method or an approach they can use again in the future. And they actually think about the way they think about problems and the way they solve problems, and they will continually improve this in order to make their problem solving more effective in the future. They also have a very can-do, positive attitude. They consider every position of each individual involved in that problem in a very empathetic way. They don't just rely on their experience at all, they're open to suggestion. They are also able to get commitment from everybody that's involved, and they will seek to have a win-win solution. And actually, when it comes to problem solving, the supervisor or the leader isn't expected to solve all the problems themselves, but actually they're expected to know who the problem could be referred to in order to find the proper solution. Who can they delegate tasks in the problem solution process to? And how can they do that while still keeping all the work that's ongoing moving forward? But even though the supervisor may delegate or assign the task to other people, they still take complete responsibility for getting all the facts needed in order to solve that problem well. A supervisor will also avoid making every problem a huge issue. And in fact, their experience tells them that planning well can avert many problems from actually happening. And they put each experience into perspective so that alternatives to the solution can be evaluated in an appropriate amount of time so the problem is solved in a timely manner. And also, a solid problem solver will acknowledge that mistakes happen, but they won't dwell over them or agonize over them, and they know that it's important to learn from whatever mistakes are happening, whether they make them or whether their team make them. Also, good problem solvers will draw on information that's easily available. So has somebody solved this problem before, and how have they solved it? What was the outcome? What did they try? And who else in the organization can you consult with, or outside experts that can help? But also, when it comes to problem solving, don't make promises that you can't keep, especially to people that are in your team or to your boss. It's better to be more realistic about what you can do to solve the problem and how quickly it will be solved. So when it comes to being a supervisor and you come to looking at making decisions, there are three types of decisions that you can be faced with. They are either routine, adaptive, or innovative. So routine decisions are those that are made when problems are pretty well defined and they're common, okay? So they happen a lot, and so you have rules and policies and procedures to solve them. So for example, if you have a team member that has defrauded the business, you have a procedure to follow to fire this person. So there's a problem, there's a solution that's actually in place. Adaptive decisions are made when problems exist and the alternative solutions are actually a little bit unusual and they're partly understood. So for example, if you work in an organization where everybody works 9 to 5, you might have an employee who wants to work part-time hours, so they want to work their 35-hour week in 4 days, not 5 days. So how can you solve that problem? There are many different ways, but there are many different alternative solutions, and you don't understand all of them, so you need to do more investigation. And then Innovative decisions are those that are made when the problems are unusual and you need a creative solution. So for example, you might be releasing a brand new product to market. How do you do it? You'll have to come up with some creative solutions to do that if you haven't done that before in your organization or in your career. So there are three types of decisions that I just described. They're routine, adaptive, and innovative. What would your approach be to those kinds of decisions? So in each of those decisions, would you delegate the decision making? Who would you bring in to solve this particular problem or make the decision? Would you ask your team members for input? What process would you use? How would you make that decision? When it comes to making a decision, there are 6 key factors that will either make your decision making easy or difficult. The first is experience and knowledge. So the more experience and knowledge you have in a topic, the more likely you're able to make a decision more effectively and efficiently. And also your ability to think creatively. So if you're able to think outside the box and think of lots of alternative solutions, you're likely to find a solution for that decision very quickly. The self-concept is all about how much do you have confidence in yourself that you can make this decision well, how you handle stress as well. So if you get very stressed from making lots of decisions, then you're probably going to be very slow at decision making. But if you are quite calm, then you'll probably make decisions quite quickly. And also interpersonal conflict. So when you've made a decision, how well do you manage your relationships with other people in order to get their buy-in that decision was the right decision to make? And then of course you come to the resources. So how much time, money, and energy do you have in making this particular decision? Which you add to making this particular decision. Then you look at routine decisions versus non-routine decisions. So when you're faced with a routine decision, are you able to follow the procedure the same every single time? And how do you react to non-routine decisions? And how do you assess the risk associated with each decision? How critical is it? Are there any written guidelines? Do you write new guidelines? What is the attitude of your organization to decision making? Who makes the decisions? Are only certain people allowed to make certain decisions at a certain level? How much information is given to you? What kind of information is it? The degree to which your decision is accepted and supported, and also how you are equipped to manage decisions as well. Let's take a look at the key ingredients for good decision making. The first is that you follow a systematic process. You typically have between 5 to 8 steps to follow in order to solve the problem or to make a decision. Involving the team is a great idea because multiple brains are better than just one brain. Some decisions can be delegated, and over time you might find that you start delegating more and more decisions as your team become more and more equipped. When it's difficult to make a decision quickly, you might want to have a brainstorm either by yourself or with other team members to see what variations of the decision could be possible. Good decision making also involves a lot of creativity and objectivity. So if you are emotionally attached to the outcome, you're less likely to make a more effective decision. So detaching your emotions from the outcome helps you make good and effective decisions. Effective decisions really are conducted in a systematic and comprehensive way. The consequences of the decision are considered and thought about. When you make a decision, you focus on positive outcomes, and really the decision made is made from goal-orientated analysis. So you look at the actual decision to be made and you consider all the alternatives before you make the final decision. Defining the problem is incredibly important because you have to understand exactly what the problem is for the decision that you're making. But also getting the right information and from whom is key. So which key stakeholders are affected by the problem or the solution to the problem? And you have to look at, okay, so what's been done before? who's involved, what do they know, what expertise do they have, who knows what, and has this decision been made before, and how is it effective to use the same method now, or even is the same decision relevant now. Developing and weighing the alternatives is important. So look at your decision or the situation in very different ways. You might not do this just on your own. You might involve other people and think of all the alternative decisions that can be made. And then you evaluate each of them to see which one is the most viable. And you evaluate them all based on equal criteria so that you only pick a solution to a problem that you know will work to the best of your ability and knowledge. Then you would look at providing a solution to this particular decision or problem, and really look at avoiding something as being the perfect solution, because it's likely the perfect solution doesn't actually exist. Maybe if you're struggling between alternatives, you might look at what your gut is telling you. So what is your intuition telling you that is the best course of action? And you could potentially turn to somebody who's a trusted outsider, somebody who isn't directly involved with the problem or the decision-making process or the consequences of the decision, and asking them for their advice, just to see if your gut instinct or your actual decision is the one that is the best one that's available to you. Then you go on to implement the decision, and then you monitor the progress to make sure that it is doing what it was meant to do. So if you want to improve your decision-making skills, have a look at the kind of information you have and try to interpret it in different ways. Maybe you want to set your criteria for success beforehand, ask other people. You might look at the decision-making process and just poke some holes in it to see if it can be improved. Maybe you want to involve your wider team, or change the way that you decide, or to actually become more rational and objective and detach yourself away, or detach your emotions away from the problem and its outcomes. Maybe you want to start educating people so they know how to make appropriate decisions. So if you use a model for decision making that works for you, maybe you can share that with other people. A great way to actually improve the process is to seek some support from the managers or the leaders in your company so that they can actually help you solve the problem. And actually the managers don't, they kind of deal with the decisions that require their level of expertise. They support the implementation of those decisions and actually credit the decision maker. But delegating decision making to the subordinates or your subordinates on routine decisions is a great way to build their trust, build their loyalty, and actually raise their self-esteem, because they see you're relying on them to actually make some key decisions in the team. And this brings us to the end of our module on problem solving and decision making.